My name is Kwanchai Moriya. I'm an illustrator, freelance illustrator. I've worked in board games for the last 6 or 7 years or so. And at this point, last year I just passed my 100th card game milestone.
No way.
I mean, if you count like every little expansion, card game, board game, then yeah, it's like 110 now, I think, yeah. I guess, gosh, there's a lot. Dinosaur Island and Catacombs were the first early things I did. I've done the Kodama series of games for Action Phase. Kabuto Sumo I've done recently. I did the Empire's Endgame with Brotherwise, which is on these bags here. It looks really cool. But yeah, lots. I mean, yeah, as an illustrator, that's like literally my title. Like, take someone's ideas and put pen to paper and create some image that evokes the atmosphere, the scene, the theme. It's always different with each publisher because each publisher has a different way, a different point man or woman that's sort of guiding, art directing. Excuse me. But in general, it means like a lot of sketching in the front of the project, and then a lot of like just rendering and painting faces and hands and feet and a lot of robots and stuff. For some reason with me, it's always different. But it's essentially the sketching is what gets me from point A to point B. Well, us from point A to point B, in figuring out what ideas are working and what ideas are not. Because board games are all about table presence and getting the mechanics, which are always just a bunch of rules, right? And giving them life so that a person feels like they are in the seat of this driver or this, elvish warrior or whatever. I prefer a medium amount of direction. I think every artist wants to say they don't want any direction, that they think especially when you're a starting out artist, you have a feeling like I know what to do and I know what to do the best visually, and everyone else can just chill, right?
Yeah.
But one thing I've learned working long enough is that it's just easier to have more hands in the pot, preferably like 3 or 4 hands at the most, and then it becomes a committee, and then it's a whole different question, right? But yeah, like having other people, especially the publisher who knows their target audience, they know the game they're making for, their price point, it's a lot of important things they need to consider. Yeah, it's important to have that feedback to sort of like help me grow and learn. When I started, I wasn't as good as an artist as I think I've become, and that's because I've had the opportunity to make a lot of mistakes and learn from people. I think right now, a thing that's interesting is that there's a lot more designers in general, right? And like of all ages, totally diverse, like coming from all sorts of different backgrounds, like job-wise or like, even in high school and like college. So I think one thing that's interesting is having an artist be on a project earlier than what is traditionally a game is finished, the rules are like completely polished, and then it goes to a publisher, and then a publisher hires an artist. But one thing that's been interesting, like Kabuto Sumo, for example, I know Tony, and Tony showed me his design. He's a designer. We talk at cons, and then we started on the project together and pitched to the publisher, and then got signed. And that's a lot more interesting for an artist, especially one that's starting out, because presumably you're getting the artist earlier on in the project and having them be integral part of the formation of the game itself. And I think that might afford some more opportunities for that art to grow and be a part of the project and shape the project and the rules and the mechanics. It's different from when I first started. I feel like there was just a really dire need for good artists when I started, like in 2013, 2012. And now there's a lot of really good artists, and the budgets are bigger. The bars have come up in terms of like approaching a publisher to just pitch. I would say that it's important to, it's so hard to be an artist right now, like in general, right? There's a million different ways to go. You can go the Patreon route and just like have your own art and do that. You can mix it up by working for contract work with like board games and doing freelance. I mean, also you can art direct, and if you're lucky enough to be part of like a full-time thing with an actual publisher. But I don't know the answers to all those questions because I only work in board games, so like my view is like very narrow. If it's questions about board games, about being successful only in board games, I can kind of answer that question.
Yeah.
And the answer is just dive in. I think more importantly, there's a lot of real places and conventions where warm bodies are meeting up and talking every year in any industry. In board games, that's easy. There's like 3 conventions that I go to every year: Origins, Gen Con, Essen in Germany, and that's the 100% like the basis for my career, because I met people there, I shook hands, and I think it's easy as an artist nowadays to get caught up in feeling like emailing and having an online presence is enough, and maybe it is, and I'm just old school, but I feel like shaking hands and looking someone in the eye is very important, and I attribute 100% of my success to that. So my answer for most people when I get asked this question is to find a place where people are actually meeting up and talking, spend the money, get a flight out somewhere, and get your feet wet, because you'll find a lot of answers to your questions more quickly than you would if you're just like emailing your way to an answer.
Publisher specific.
Yeah, okay. Portfolio, a nice portfolio with about 12 to 15 pieces. Your best piece is the second piece. So when you open up the portfolio, your first piece is good. Your second piece is like, oh shit. I'm sorry. Oh snap, right? And then you go through, and piece number 12 is like, oh, this is, yeah. And then just smile, be nice, shake a hand, strong, give a card. Yeah, all the basic stuff.